My name is Hannah Collins. I'm 28 years old, and that story begins on a sunny Saturday morning in Charleston, South Carolina. A day so bright and perfect that it felt cruel how my stomach churned with dread instead of excitement. I remember standing in front of the mirror in my hotel room, adjusting the soft blue dress my sister picked out for the bridesmaids. It was beautiful, honestly, flowy chiffon that brushed my ankles, the kind of color that would look angelic in photographs. But when I looked at my reflection, I didn't feel beautiful. I felt erased. Like I was trying to blend in, disappear into the background, and not take up any space. Maybe that was the point. My sister, Lily, was the kind of woman who drew attention just by walking into a room. We'd been opposites since childhood. She was radiant, outspoken, always adored. I was the quiet one, the listener, the one who stayed up late helping her with homework she'd forgotten or calming her down after her breakups. I never resented her for it, not really. I thought that was just how love worked in families. You gave and gave because you wanted them to shine. But that morning, as I pinned my hair back and tried to convince myself that I looked good enough, I couldn't ignore the pit in my chest. It wasn't just the wedding. It was everything leading up to it. When Lily got engaged 6 months ago, I was happy for her, at least at first. Her fiancé, Ethan, was charming in that smooth, practiced way that makes you want to trust him, but also keeps you on edge. He was polite to me, always smiling, always asking about work, but behind that, I caught a flicker of judgment. The way his eyes sometimes lingered too long, assessing, as if deciding whether I was someone worth knowing. He and I had nothing in common. I worked as a children's therapist at a small clinic downtown. He was in finance, loud dinners, golf trips, people who never worried about bills or grocery lists. But still I tried. I showed up to their engagement parties, smiled through their endless wedding planning, even when I started to feel like I was being quietly excluded from things. The first sign was when Lily texted me, "Hey, the girls are going dress shopping on Saturday, but don't worry, I'll pick something for you." I stared at that message for a long time. It was small, right? Not worth making a fuss over. But it stung. I was her sister. Then came the seating chart drama. At one point, Mom mentioned casually, "Oh, I think Lily's putting you at the back table with the college friends. You don't mind, right?" And I said, "Of course not." Even though I did. Because it wasn't about the table, it was about being sidelined. Again. When the morning of the wedding finally came, I told myself I'd get through it. Smile for the photos. Pretend everything was fine. That's what I always did. The ceremony was held in a rustic barn-style venue surrounded by oak trees and soft white lights. It was breathtaking, honestly, everything my mom ever dreamed her daughters would have. I stood next to Lily as she exchanged vows, holding her bouquet while she cried pretty tears. And when everyone applauded, I clapped too, even though my heart felt heavy. The reception, though, that's where everything started to unravel. When I walked into the reception hall, the energy was alive. Music, laughter, champagne glasses clinking. Tables were arranged in perfect circles, each one draped in cream linens and topped with wildflowers. I looked around, searching for my name card, expecting to see it near my parents or the bridal party. But it wasn't. I found it way in the back corner of the room, a small table near the buffet line, with a single chair. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I looked around for someone to ask, maybe one of the planners. Then I saw Lily across the room, laughing with her new husband, glowing in her lace gown. I hesitated before walking up. "Hey," I said softly, trying to smile. "I think there might have been a mix-up with the seating. I'm kind of alone back there." She blinked, her smile faltering for half a second. "Oh, that's right," she said quickly. "It's just, Ethan's family brought extra people last minute, and we had to reshuffle things. You don't mind, do you?" I wanted to say, "Yes, I do mind." I wanted to say, "I'm your sister. How could you leave me alone like that?" But all that came out was a whisper. "No, it's fine." Her relief was immediate, like she'd been waiting for me to say that so she could go back to being the perfect bride. She kissed my cheek, thanked me for being understanding, and spun away. I went back to that little table in the corner. The music started, and couples filled the dance floor. I sat there, clutching my napkin, pretending to scroll through my phone so no one would notice how alone I looked. People passed by, their eyes flicking toward me with polite discomfort before they looked away. I tried to smile whenever someone glanced my way, but each minute felt heavier. The waiter came by and asked, "Waiting for someone?" I wanted to say no, but the lie stuck in my throat. So I just nodded.
Yeah.
He's running late. The truth was there was no he. There hadn't been anyone in a long time. About halfway through dinner, I excused myself to the restroom just to breathe. The mirror in there felt safer than all the smiling faces outside. I leaned against the sink, staring at the makeup I'd spent hours perfecting, and whispered, "You're fine. Just get through tonight." When I walked back out, I hesitated near the entrance to the hall. The music had slowed. People were paired off, dancing under the string lights. Lily's laughter echoed above the sound of the band. I felt invisible, a ghost haunting a party I didn't belong to. And then, out of nowhere, someone spoke behind me. "You look like you could use a rescue." I turned around. A man, maybe early 30s, stood there in a tailored dark suit with his tie loosened. He had the kind of face that looked kind even before he smiled. Soft hazel eyes, tousled hair, a small scar near his jaw that made him look just slightly imperfect in the best way. "Excuse me?" I asked, half laughing. He nodded toward my empty table. "You've been sitting alone for an hour. Thought maybe you'd appreciate some backup." I felt heat rise in my cheeks.
Oh.
"No, I'm fine, really." "Right," he said with a knowing grin. "You're totally fine sitting in a corner at a wedding, pretending to text your non-existent boyfriend." I froze. You saw that?" He shrugged. "You're not as invisible as you think." Before I could respond, he held out his hand. "Come on, act like you're with me." "What?" "Trust me," he said, lowering his voice with a playful smile. "They're about to start the next slow dance. You don't want to be the only one sitting out again, do you?" Something about the way he said it, not pitying, not pushy, just quietly genuine, made me pause. For once, someone saw me. Not as the quiet sister, not as the leftover bridesmaid, but as a person. So I took his hand. He led me onto the dance floor just as the band began a soft cover of "Can't Help Falling in Love." My heart raced. Everyone around us was smiling, lost in their own joy, but for the first time that night, I wasn't on the outside looking in. He didn't ask my story, didn't try to fill the silence. He just held me gently, like he knew I needed to remember what being seen felt like. When the song ended, he leaned down slightly and whispered, "You're stronger than you look, you know that?" I wanted to ask how he knew, but instead I just smiled. "Thank you for this." He nodded, his eyes warm. "Anytime." I didn't even know his name yet, but somehow, that moment, that small, unexpected act of kindness, was the first time in years that I felt something shift inside me. It was the start of everything I didn't know I needed to find again. The next morning, sunlight spilled through my bedroom window in soft golden stripes, brushing over the unpacked suitcase at the foot of my bed. My phone buzzed with messages, mostly from family group chats, about final wedding plans. My stomach twisted reading them. Every text felt like a reminder that I was only invited out of obligation, not love. I sat at the edge of my bed, running my fingers through my hair, thinking about the woman I used to be. Emily Carter, 29, the older sister who always showed up, who helped with homework, who drove her sister to prom when her date bailed.
And now?
I was the embarrassment, the pity guest. Mom's message blinked at the top of my screen. "Be on time tomorrow. Please don't make it awkward for your sister." I laughed bitterly under my breath. "Don't make it awkward? You mean don't exist too loudly?" I muttered. By the time I packed my dress and heels, my chest already felt heavy. I didn't know why I was still going. Maybe because I still wanted, deep down, for someone to see me, to remind me I wasn't invisible. The drive to the venue took 2 hours through winding country roads. The Carter estate sat at the edge of a small town, surrounded by oaks and wildflower fields. It looked like something out of a bridal magazine, perfectly polished, painfully fake. I parked at the far end of the gravel lot, not wanting to draw attention when I stepped out of my old Honda Civic next to rows of luxury cars. Inside, guests were already gathering, dressed in pastel gowns and crisp suits. Everyone smiled, hugged, and gushed over the decorations. I didn't belong there. At the check-in table, my cousin Haley smiled politely, her eyes flicking to my simple navy blue dress. "Oh, hey, Emily. You look nice." "Thanks," I said flatly. Her fingers hesitated over the guest list. You're seated at table 11. Over there, near the back." "Of course." I glanced toward the seating area, a long stretch of round tables covered in white linens and floral centerpieces. Table 11 was tucked behind a pillar, half hidden from the main reception. My chest tightened. The ceremony began soon after, and as everyone stood to watch my sister walk down the aisle, I felt something sting deep inside me. She looked stunning, lace gown, golden hair pinned up perfectly, her smile bright enough to fill the whole courtyard. People whispered about how radiant she looked, how happy she must be. But all I saw was someone who'd stolen everything that mattered. As the vows began, I fought to hold myself together. I had once believed love was sacred, that family meant loyalty. Watching her exchange rings with the man who used to hold me when I cried shattered what little hope I had left. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I forced myself to clap with everyone else, though my palms were trembling. During the reception, I tried to blend into the background, but whispers followed me like shadows. "Isn't that her ex?" God, I would have died before showing up. She must really hate herself to come here. I sat down at my lonely table, pretending not to notice. My champagne glass sat untouched, the bubbles fading just like my patience. My sister, Lila, floated around the room, glowing under the spotlight, greeting every guest except me. At one point, she passed by my table, without even a glance. It was like I didn't exist. And that's when it happened. "Hey," a voice said behind me, low and steady. I turned to see a tall man standing a few feet away, early 30s, sharp jawline, dark suit, kind eyes. He looked slightly out of place, holding his drink with the ease of someone who wasn't impressed by all the glamour. He tilted his head. "You look like you could use some company." I managed a tight smile. "Guess that obvious, huh?" He smiled softly. "A little. Mind if I sit?" I hesitated but nodded. "Go ahead." He pulled out the chair beside me. "I'm Noah, friend of the groom." Of course he was. "I'm Emily," I said quietly. His brows lifted slightly. He'd heard the name before, I could tell. But instead of the awkward silence I expected, he just nodded, as if he already understood more than he should. We sat for a while, listening to the laughter, the clinking glasses, the music. I noticed his calm presence immediately. He didn't pity me, didn't ask invasive questions. Just sat there, offering silent comfort. Then, as the first dance began, he leaned closer and said something that caught me completely off guard. "Look," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the soft music. "I know this might sound weird, but if anyone asks, just act like you're with me." I blinked, confused.
What?
He nodded subtly toward a nearby group whispering behind their napkins. "They've been staring at you since you walked in. Trust me, I've been at enough weddings to spot that kind of gossip. Let's give them something else to talk about." A laugh escaped me, unexpected and shaky. "You don't even know me." He smiled. "I don't need to. You just look like someone who's had enough of being alone tonight." Something in his tone hit me harder than I expected. No pity, no judgment, just truth. So, I played along. I leaned in slightly when people glanced our way. We talked about meaningless things, the music, the food, the terrible speeches. But underneath it all, I felt something shift. For the first time in months, I wasn't drowning in silence. At one point, Lila noticed us. Her eyes flicked across the room, locking on me, and for the first time that night, she looked uncomfortable. I couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of satisfaction. No one noticed too. "Is that your sister?" "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "The bride." He looked at her, then back at me. "She doesn't seem thrilled to see you happy." I laughed bitterly. "She never has been." The music changed, and Noah stood, holding out his hand. Dance with me. I shook my head quickly. Oh, no, I'm not. Come on, he said gently. You deserve one good memory tonight. Against every instinct, I took his hand. His grip was warm, steady. We stepped onto the dance floor, surrounded by couples swaying under twinkling string lights. It felt surreal. Me, dancing at my sister's wedding, pretending to belong. But the more I moved, the more the noise around me faded. For a moment, I wasn't the ex, the outcast, or the family embarrassment. I was just me. When the song ended, he leaned closer and whispered, "You're stronger than you think." I didn't know why, but those words hit something deep inside me. Maybe because no one had said them in so long. As the night went on, we stayed together, talking, laughing softly, pretending we were something we weren't. When guests began leaving, Noah walked me to my car. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely steady. "For, not making me feel like a ghost." He smiled. "You're not a ghost, Emily. You're just surrounded by people who forgot how to see you." I opened my car door, heart unexpectedly heavy. "Will I see you again?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly.
Maybe.
"But if not, don't let tonight make you small again." And with that, he walked away into the night, disappearing into the rows of cars and fading music. As I drove home through the quiet darkness, I replayed his words over and over. "Don't let tonight make you small again." I didn't know it then, but those words would change everything. Because what started as a stranger's kindness at my sister's wedding would soon unravel secrets I wasn't ready to face, secrets that would prove the betrayal went far deeper than I ever imagined. And by the time I found out the truth, I wouldn't be the same person anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the twinkle lights from the reception, heard the laughter, the music, and Noah's voice echoing softly in my head. "Don't let tonight make you small again." It was strange how a single sentence from a stranger could cut deeper than a lifetime of conversations with people I loved. By morning, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from my mother. "Your behavior last night was inappropriate, Emily." People were asking questions. "You embarrassed your sister." I just stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Embarrassed her? For what? Existing? For not crying quietly in the corner like I was supposed to? I tossed my phone onto the bed and walked to the mirror. My eyes were still puffy from crying. The navy dress I'd worn hung loosely on the chair, a reminder of how uncomfortable I'd felt in my own skin that night. But under all that pain, something else had started to burn. Not anger exactly, more like the first flicker of self-respect I'd buried years ago. That weekend, I stayed mostly indoors, trying to process everything. I thought about Noah, his steady eyes, the calm way he'd stood beside me when everyone else had turned away. I didn't even know his last name, but somehow, I couldn't stop thinking about him. By Monday morning, my sister's wedding photos started showing up online. Picture-perfect smiles, sunlight on lace, champagne toasts. And there I was, in the background of one photo, smiling faintly beside Noah. The caption read, "A beautiful day for love and family." I wanted to laugh.
Family.
Scrolling through the pictures, I noticed something odd. Lila's husband, Eric, standing a few feet away from her in most shots. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the same detached expression I remembered from when we were together years ago. My chest tightened. I'd worked so hard to bury those memories. The nights I'd waited for him to call, the messages left on read, the way he'd slowly pulled away until one day he was gone. And now he was my sister's husband. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number.
Hey.
"It's Noah. Hope I'm not crossing a line texting you. Just wanted to make sure you got home okay." My heart jumped. I stared at the message for a good minute before typing back. "You remembered my number? You gave it to me when I asked if I could text you later. Don't tell me you forgot already." A small smile tugged at my lips. I had been so nervous that night, I barely remembered giving him my number. "I'm fine," I wrote. "Thanks again. You kind of saved me from losing my mind." "Anytime," he replied. "You didn't deserve how they treated you." His words lingered in my head long after our short conversation ended. It wasn't just the kindness, it was the validation. Someone had finally seen what was happening. That night, I sat outside on my porch, the cool air brushing against my skin as I replayed the last few months. Lila had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly likable. She could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. When Eric and I broke up years ago, Mom had said it was for the best. She didn't know the truth, that Eric had left because he was confused, because he didn't know what he wanted. Apparently, what he wanted was my sister. And she had no problem taking him. A bitter laugh escaped me. Maybe Noah was right. I'd spent too long making myself small for people who didn't deserve my softness. Over the next few days, Noah and I started talking more. Nothing intense at first, just light texts about our jobs, our favorite movies, random late-night jokes. But somewhere between the sarcasm and the sincerity, I began to feel something shift. He wasn't like the men I'd known before.
He didn't talk over me.
He didn't treat me like a charity case. He listened. One evening, he called instead of texting. "Hey," he said, his voice warm, familiar. "You sound tired. Long day." "Yeah," I sighed, sinking into my couch. "Just a lot of family drama I didn't sign up for." "Still about your sister?" "Always about my sister." I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. She just sent me an invitation to their post-wedding brunch next weekend. Like she expects me to show up and smile like nothing happened. "Are you going to go?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to skip it, but another part of me wants to walk in there and show them I'm not broken. There was a pause. Then Noah said quietly, "Then do that. Walk in there and remind them you still have a backbone." His words made something in my chest ache in the best way. "You're really good at this, you know." "At what?" "Making people believe they can survive things that should have destroyed them." He chuckled softly. "Maybe because I've been there too." We talked for hours after that about mistakes, second chances, how sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who hurt you most. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter, like someone had helped carry a weight I didn't even realize I was still holding. But that peace didn't last. The following weekend, I decided to go to the brunch. I didn't tell anyone, especially not Noah. I just wanted to prove to myself I could face them without falling apart. When I arrived, the garden behind the country club was decorated with soft pink flowers and gold balloons. My sister was standing near the center, glowing as usual, surrounded by a circle of guests. She spotted me instantly, and for a moment, her smile faltered. "Emily," she said, approaching with a tight smile. "You made it." "Yeah," I said evenly. "Wouldn't miss it." Her eyes flicked over my simple white sundress, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "You look nice." Simple, but nice. The subtext was loud enough to echo. I forced a smile. "You look the same as always, perfect." Her expression twitched for a second. Victory, small as it was, warmed me. Then, as I turned to grab a drink, I heard someone whisper behind me. "Isn't she the one who used to date Eric?"
Yeah.
Heard she showed up to the wedding alone. Tragic, really. My throat tightened, but before I could walk away, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Emily." I turned, startled. Noah stood a few feet away, holding a small gift box. He looked just as surprised to see me. "What? How?" I stammered. He smiled faintly. "Eric invited me. We worked together, remember?"
Right.
He'd said he was a friend of the groom. I just hadn't realized how close. Lila's eyes narrowed slightly as she noticed us talking. "Oh," she said smoothly, joining in. "You two know each other?" Noah glanced at her, and then at me. "Yeah," he said easily, slipping his hand into mine. "We met at the wedding. Been talking ever since." Lila's smile froze. "Well," she said tightly, "I guess I should have expected that." I raised an eyebrow. "Expected what?" "Nothing," she said quickly, brushing it off. "You just always find a way to make things about you, don't you?" Her tone was soft, but the venom underneath it was unmistakable. For the first time in years, I didn't shrink back. I met her eyes squarely. "You mean like how you made my relationship about you?" Gasps rippled through the small crowd nearby. Lila's face went pale. Eric froze across the lawn, his drink halfway to his mouth. Noah's grip on my hand tightened slightly, not to stop me, but to ground me. Lila stepped closer, her voice low. "Don't start something you can't handle, Emily." I smiled, calm but sharp. "Oh, trust me. I'm done staying quiet." And just like that, years of swallowed pain cracked open. The rest of the brunch blurred together. Awkward glances, whispered gossip, Lila pretending everything was fine while her perfect facade began to splinter. But what struck me most was how Noah never left my side. He didn't try to rescue me.
He didn't make a scene.
He just stood there, quietly reminding me I wasn't alone anymore. Later, as we left together, he looked at me with that same steady calm. "You did good in there," he said. I laughed, half shaky, half relieved. "I think I just declared emotional war on my own family." "Maybe," he said softly. "But sometimes you have to stop letting people rewrite your story." That night, I realized he was right. Because as painful as it was to confront my sister, I'd finally taken the first step toward reclaiming my voice. But I had no idea the real story was only beginning, one that would reveal not just betrayal, but lies buried so deep they'd change everything I thought I knew about my family and about Noah. The next morning, I woke up with that same restless, nervous energy that comes after standing up for yourself. It was liberating, but also terrifying. The brunch had been a mess, whispers, glares, and the quiet explosion of everything my family had tried to bury under the word love. And yet, for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the one who had done something wrong. I made myself coffee and opened my phone to check my messages. There was one from Noah. "Proud of you. I know that wasn't easy." I smiled at the screen, warmth blooming in my chest. Then another message came through, this one from an unknown number. "You should know the truth about your sister's husband before you get hurt again." My stomach tightened. I stared at it for a long time, rereading the words, trying to make sense of them. There was no name, no clue who it was from. Just that single sentence. Part of me wanted to delete it and move on, but another part, the part that had spent years being lied to, refused to ignore it. I tried calling the number. Straight to voicemail. When Noah called later that afternoon, I told him about it. "That's weird," he said. "Do you think it's just someone stirring up trouble after the brunch?" "Maybe," I said, though even as I said it, my gut told me no. It just felt pointed, like whoever sent it knew something. There was a pause on the line. Then he asked carefully, "Do you want me to look into it? I might be able to find out who it came from." I hesitated. "How would you even do that?" He chuckled softly. "Let's just say my job gives me access to a few tools most people don't have." That caught my attention. I remembered he'd mentioned he worked with Eric, something about consulting for his company, but I'd never asked for details. "What exactly do you do, Noah?" I asked. "I handle data and security stuff," he said after a moment. "Mostly background checks, digital forensics." "It's boring." I laughed. "You just described the opposite of boring." "Yeah, well," he said lightly, "old habits die hard." Something in his tone made me curious, but I let it go. That evening, I got another message. This one wasn't anonymous. It was from Lila. "You really embarrassed me yesterday, Emily. Don't pretend what you said didn't have consequences. Eric's furious, and so am I. You need to apologize before things get worse." Worse? For years, that word had controlled me. I'd always backed down, always apologized first, even when I wasn't wrong. But this time, I typed only 2 words back. "Not happening." It felt good. Powerful, even. But I didn't realize that single text would light a fuse that couldn't be undone. 2 days later, Noah asked if I could meet him downtown. "There's something I think you need to see," he said. When I arrived, he was sitting at an outdoor cafe, a small folder on the table beside his coffee. His expression was serious. "Okay," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You're scaring me." "What is it?" He pushed the folder toward me. "I traced that message you got." I frowned, flipping it open. Inside were printouts, phone logs, email traces, timestamps. My eyes widened when I saw the sender's information. It came from someone named David Sloan, Noah said. Does that name mean anything to you? My throat went dry. David Sloan was Eric's old business partner. He left the company years ago after some kind of lawsuit. Yeah, Noah said quietly. Except he didn't just leave.
He was forced out.
Eric accused him of embezzlement. I looked up sharply. Are you saying he didn't do it? Noah hesitated, then nodded. That's what it looks like. David's been trying to clear his name ever since. He must have reached out to you because he found something. I felt dizzy. Found what? Noah pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. There were screenshots of emails, ones I didn't recognize. They were between Eric and someone using an alias. The subject lines read things like, transfer complete and delete all correspondence. No, I whispered. You're saying Eric set him up? That's exactly what I'm saying, Noah replied. And your sister helped. The world seemed to tilt. Why would she do that? Noah's eyes softened. Money. Image. Maybe both. Eric's company is tied to a lot of shady deals. But from what I've found, it looks like your sister knew more than anyone realized. I sat back, trying to breathe. My mind was spinning. Flashes of Lila's perfect smile, her expensive clothes, her carefully curated social media. For years, I'd envied her life. Now I wasn't sure it was real at all. So, what do we do with this? I asked finally. That's up to you, Noah said. We could send it anonymously to the authorities. Or you could confront them yourself. I looked at him, searching his face. Why are you helping me, Noah? You barely know me. He was quiet for a moment before he said softly, because I know what it's like to have people lie to your face and make you question your own reality. And because I care about you. Something in the way he said it made my heart stutter. But even as warmth spread through me, there was a flicker of unease. He'd said he worked with Eric. That's how we met. How deep did that connection really go? Later that night, I couldn't stop thinking about everything I'd learned. I opened my laptop and searched for David Sloan. His name came up in old articles, all painting him as a thief who'd stolen thousands from his company. But buried deep in one comment section was a single line from an anonymous user. Eric and Lila Carter made sure he took the fall. My blood ran cold. I sent a message to the email listed on David's old website, not really expecting a reply. But within minutes, my phone buzzed. Emily Carter? I was wondering when you'd reach out. The message continued. They ruined my life. I can prove it, and if you want justice, I think you deserve to see how deep it goes. I stared at the words, my pulse racing. Justice. It wasn't a word I'd ever associated with myself. I'd always been the one swallowing the pain, not fighting back. But now, as I sat there in the dark, something inside me shifted again. This wasn't just about old wounds anymore. It was about truth. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find it. The next day, I met David at a diner off the highway. He was older, with weary eyes and a quiet bitterness that came from years of being disbelieved. I didn't want to drag you into this, he said, sliding a flash drive across the table. But since your sister's name keeps coming up, I figured you'd want to know. What's on it? I asked. Emails, bank statements, contracts, everything they used to frame me. But it's bigger than that. Eric's company has been laundering money through fake accounts. Your sister's name is on the paperwork. My breath caught. You're sure? He nodded grimly. Positive. When I got home, I called Noah immediately. He picked up on the first ring. Emily, I have proof, I said breathlessly. Everything David said, it's true. I've got files linking them both. There was silence on the line. Then Noah said quietly, Okay, listen to me carefully. Don't send it to anyone yet. We need to handle this right. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, if we go to the authorities, Eric will have time to cover it up. People like him have connections. Let me look into it first. I hesitated, then said, Okay. But as I hung up, something gnawed at the back of my mind. That slight tremor in his voice, the way he'd said, like this was more personal than it should have been. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the web I was caught in was bigger than just my sister and her husband. And when I finally fell asleep, one question followed me into my dreams. What if Noah wasn't the hero I thought he was? The morning after the wedding, I woke up to the soft light filtering through the hotel curtains and the dull ache of exhaustion in my chest. My dress was still hanging over the chair, the hem wrinkled and faintly stained with champagne and tears I didn't remember shedding. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty coffee cup from the night before. Everything felt surreal. The chaos, the humiliation, the cold indifference for my family, it had all blurred into a kind of numb haze. But the one thing that cut through it all was him. Ethan. The stranger who had rescued me from total isolation, who had reached across that invisible line my family had drawn and said, "Act like you're with me." It had started as a lie, a moment of kindness from someone I barely knew. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt like that moment had been the only real thing about the entire night. I pulled on jeans and a sweater and went downstairs, hoping a strong cup of coffee would help clear my head. The lobby was quiet except for the clinking of cups and the low hum of early morning conversation. And there, sitting near the window, was Ethan, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, eyes lost in whatever thoughts were swimming through his mind. He looked up when he saw me, and the faintest smile tugged at his lips. "Morning." "Morning," I murmured, sliding into the seat across from him. "Sleep okay?" I let out a weak laugh. "Define okay?" "Yeah," he said with a half-smile. "That's what I thought." For a moment, silence stretched between us. But it wasn't awkward, it was heavy, comfortable in a strange way. Like we'd shared something we couldn't quite name. Finally, he said, "You looked like you could use some air last night." I didn't mean to intrude. I shook my head.
No.
"You didn't intrude. You saved me, actually." He looked surprised. "Saved you?" "Yeah," I said softly, tracing my finger around the rim of my mug. I was sitting there, surrounded by people I've known my whole life, and I've never felt more invisible. Then you just sat down, like it didn't matter who I was or why I was alone. He leaned back slightly, studying me with that quiet, steady gaze of his. "Sometimes people don't need to know your whole story to see you," he said. "Sometimes they just need to care for a second." That hit harder than I expected. I looked at him, wanting to thank him again, but the words got caught somewhere between my heart and my throat. Instead, I said, "You know, I never got to thank you properly. For being kind. For pretending." He smiled. Maybe it didn't have to be pretending. Something fluttered inside my chest. It wasn't romance exactly, not yet, but it was something real, something honest. And after everything I'd been through, that was rare enough to make me catch my breath. We talked for hours that morning about small things, normal things. His work as a freelance photographer, my job at a small publishing house in Boston, the kind of books we liked, the kind of people we couldn't stand. There was a quiet rhythm to it, like we'd known each other much longer than a single chaotic night. But eventually, the reality I'd been avoiding crept back in. My phone buzzed on the table, and when I saw the name flash across the screen, Claire, my heart sank. "Are you going to answer?" Ethan asked gently. I shook my head. "Not yet. I'm not ready." He nodded, not pressing, and I was grateful for that. When I finally worked up the nerve to check the message, it was short and clinical. "You left early.
Hope you're okay."
We'll talk when you've cooled off."
Cooled off.
As if what happened wasn't cruel or humiliating. As if I was just being dramatic for feeling hurt. I laughed bitterly.
She doesn't get it.
She never will. Ethan looked at me, then stopped waiting for her to. It was such a simple statement, but it hit like a revelation. I'd spent so much of my life waiting for my sister to see me, for my parents to be proud, for someone in that family to care enough to defend me. But maybe the truth was that I didn't need their validation anymore. Maybe it was time to stop chasing something that was never real. Later that day, Ethan and I checked out of the hotel together. He offered to give me a ride back to Boston since he was headed that way for work. I hesitated at first. It felt strange trusting someone I barely knew, but something about him made me feel safe. And after everything that had happened, that was enough. The drive was quiet at first, the kind of comfortable silence that happens when both people are lost in thought. The fall colors blurred past the windows, gold, red, and fading green, and for the first time in days, I felt my lungs fill without that tight ache in my chest. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said after a while. "Sure." "What actually happened last night? I mean, I could tell something was off, but you never said why they treated you like that." I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to open that box again, but another part, the part that was tired of carrying everything alone, needed to. So I told him. I told him about how Claire had always been the favorite, the golden child, who could do no wrong. How I'd been blamed for things I didn't do, overlooked when I worked twice as hard, and quietly exiled whenever I made the mistake of standing up for myself. I told him about the wedding invitations, how I'd found out I was seated at the overflow table at the back, near the kitchen doors, while her college friends, people she hadn't spoken to in years, sat up front. I told him about the look on her face when I tried to talk to her, the way her new husband avoided my eyes, and how my parents just smiled politely as if nothing was wrong. When I finished, I felt both drained and lighter, like saying it out loud had loosened something inside me. Ethan didn't interrupt once. He just listened, really listened in a way no one in my life ever had. When I finally stopped talking, he said quietly, "That wasn't your fault, you know. None of it. You were never the problem, they were." I blinked hard, trying not to cry. "You sound pretty sure for someone who just met me." "I don't need to know the whole story to know what cruelty looks like," he said. "And what I saw last night, that was cruelty." By the time we reached the city, something had shifted. It wasn't just about my sister or the wedding anymore. It was about me. About what I'd let myself believe, what I'd accepted as normal for too long. When Ethan pulled up in front of my apartment building, I didn't want to say goodbye.
I didn't even know why.
Maybe because he'd seen me at my lowest and hadn't turned away. Maybe because, for the first time in years, someone looked at me like I mattered. He handed me his card. "If you ever need a friend," he said, "or someone to take bad family photos off your hands, I'm around." I laughed softly, clutching the card like it was something precious.
"Thank you, Ethan."
"For everything." He smiled, and for a moment I thought he might say something more, but he didn't. He just nodded and drove off, leaving me standing there in the fading sunlight, feeling both empty and full at the same time. That night, as I unpacked my suitcase, I came across the small favor bag from the wedding, the one with the gold initials and the thank you note inside. I almost threw it away. But then I saw the message printed in delicate script. "Love always finds its way back." It made me laugh, bitterly at first, then softly. Maybe love did find its way back. Just not the way my sister thought it would. Because something told me my story with Ethan wasn't over yet. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to find out where it might lead. It had been 3 weeks since the wedding, but I still woke up some mornings with that same dull ache in my chest. The memory of sitting alone at that table, the clinking of champagne glasses, the muffled laughter that wasn't mine, haunted me like a song I couldn't turn off. I tried to move on. I threw myself into work at the publishing house, editing manuscripts late into the night, convincing myself that being productive meant being okay. But every time I walked past a flower shop, or saw a white dress in a store window, that night came flooding back. Not just the humiliation, but the loneliness of realizing my family would never see me the way I hoped they would. And then, out of nowhere, Ethan called. It was a Wednesday evening, the kind where the city was already sinking into early winter darkness, and I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed. "Hey," his voice came through, low and warm, like a memory I didn't know I missed. I froze for a second, a smile tugging at my lips despite myself.
"Ethan."
"I was wondering when you'd pop up again." He laughed softly. "Guess I'm predictable. I'm actually in Boston for a photography exhibit. Thought maybe we could grab a coffee, or something stronger if you're free." I hesitated for just a moment. The safe version of me, the one who avoided messy emotions, would have said no. But the truth was I wanted to see him. I wanted to be around someone who didn't make me feel like a shadow in my own life. "Coffee sounds great," I said. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he echoed. "It's a date." I didn't realize how much I needed that night until I saw him again. He was standing by the window of a small coffee shop downtown, dressed casually, dark jacket, messy hair, a camera slung over his shoulder like it was part of him. When he saw me, his whole face lit up in that quiet way of his, the kind of smile that didn't just show in his mouth but reached his eyes. "You look better," he said after we sat down. "I guess that's what 3 weeks of not crying at family events will do to you," I said dryly. He chuckled. "That's progress." We talked for hours again, about everything and nothing. I learned that he'd been traveling the past few years, shooting small towns and hidden stories across the U.S., people whose lives didn't make headlines, but deserved to be remembered anyway. He showed me some photos on his camera. A fisherman in Maine, a kid playing baseball in Kansas, a woman in Texas painting her porch at sunset. "They're beautiful," I said, staring at one of them. "They're real," he replied simply. "That's what I try to capture, the truth people overlook." Something about that hit me. Maybe because that's how I'd always felt. Overlooked, half visible in a family that only saw what it wanted to see. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Ethan, it was Claire.
Hey, can we talk?
"It's important." The words made my stomach twist. I hadn't heard her voice since the wedding, and I didn't want to, but curiosity or maybe old habits got the better of me. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noticing the look on my face. "It's my sister," I said quietly. "She wants to talk." He didn't say anything right away, just nodded. "You don't owe her anything, you know." "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Claire's message replayed in my mind over and over. "It's important." What could possibly be important enough to say now? Guilt? Justification? Another round of pretending nothing happened? By morning, I decided to meet her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed closure. I was tired of being the ghost in my own story. We met at a small cafe near her new house, a cozy little place with white walls, soft jazz, and the faint smell of cinnamon. When she walked in, she looked exactly the same, polished, confident, perfect, like the kind of person who never had to apologize for anything. "Thanks for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I didn't respond. I just watched her, waiting. She sighed. "Look, about the wedding." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't start with about the wedding like it was a misunderstanding. You humiliated me, Claire. You made sure everyone saw where I belonged. At the edge, out of sight." Her expression faltered, just slightly. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I shot back. "You had 100 guests and somehow, your only sister ended up alone at a table near the catering trays." Claire's jaw tightened. "You always think everything's about you, don't you? The seating chart wasn't personal. You just make everything dramatic." I laughed, but it came out bitter and broken.
Right.
"Because nothing's ever your fault, is it? Not when you lied about me in college. Not when you told Mom and Dad I was jealous. And not when you made me feel like an embarrassment at your wedding." Her cheeks flushed. "You need to let go of the past, Emma." "I did," I said, standing up. "The problem is, you keep dragging me back into it." She didn't respond. Just sat there, lips pressed tight, eyes darting away. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the same way. I was done being angry. I was done giving her that power. I left her sitting there and walked out into the cold air, my hands trembling, not from rage this time, but from release. Later that night, I called Ethan. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I finally said what I should have said years ago," I told him. "And for once, she didn't have the last word." "That sounds like peace," he said quietly. "It feels like it." There was a pause, and then he said, "You know, there's something about you, Emma. You've been hurt, but you don't stay broken. You keep standing back up. That's rare."
I didn't know what to say.
So I just whispered, "Thank you." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you come with me this weekend? I'm shooting a small wedding up in Vermont. Just a favor for a friend. You could use a change of scenery. Plus, I might need a co-pilot." The idea made me laugh. A wedding, huh? You sure about that? Hey, he teased, maybe this one will have better seating. So I went, and somehow that little road trip became something bigger. It wasn't about escaping Boston or forgetting my family. It was about finding something I'd lost a long time ago.
Joy.
Freedom. A sense of belonging that wasn't tied to blood or approval. We spent the weekend driving through winding mountain roads, talking about everything from childhood memories to the things we were afraid to admit out loud. When he wasn't behind the camera, Ethan was telling stories, funny, sad, human stories, and listening to mine like they mattered. On the last night, after the shoot, we sat by a fire pit outside the cabin he'd rented. The stars were so bright they almost didn't look real. I used to think family was supposed to be everything, I said, staring into the flames. That if I just tried harder, they'd finally see me. But maybe family isn't who you're born with. Maybe it's who shows up when you need them. Ethan smiled softly. I think you just figured out the thing most people spend their whole lives trying to learn. The fire crackled between us, and I felt this strange calm settle in my chest, the kind that only comes when you've survived something and finally stopped looking backward. He reached over then, brushing his hand lightly against mine. I'm glad I sat down next to you that night, he said. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen.
Completely.
So am I whispered. That night, I realized something important. Love doesn't always arrive the way you expect it. Sometimes it shows up in a stranger's voice, a quiet act of kindness, a seat pulled out beside you when you've been left alone. And sometimes, it doesn't save you. It just reminds you that you were never broken in the first place. It's funny how peace sneaks up on you. You don't notice it arriving. There's no grand moment, no orchestra swell. One day, you just wake up and realize your chest doesn't hurt anymore. That the silence in your house isn't loneliness. It's quiet, and it's yours. That's how it felt 3 months after the Vermont trip. Life had softened in ways I didn't expect. Work was steady, my tiny apartment was finally starting to feel like home, and Ethan and I were something. Not defined, not rushed, but real. We talked every day, and when he came through Boston for shoots, he stayed over, filling my space with laughter and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. But the thing about healing is, it's never just about moving forward. It's about going back and making peace with what's left behind. And for me, that meant facing my parents. When I got the text from my mom, "Come by for dinner. We'd like to talk." My first instinct was to ignore it. After everything that had happened, I didn't owe them that. But part of me knew I had to go. Not for them, but for me. So the following Saturday, I drove back to the house I grew up in, that picture-perfect white colonial on Maple Street, where every memory was layered with both warmth and hurt. The porch light was on when I pulled up, casting a soft glow over the snow-dusted steps. For a second, I almost turned around. But then I thought about the girl who sat alone at that wedding table, and I refused to be her again. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. She looked older somehow, smaller. Grief and guilt have a way of shrinking people. "Emma," she said softly, eyes uncertain. "I'm glad you came." I nodded, but didn't hug her. "You said you wanted to talk." She led me into the dining room, where my dad was already seated, hands folded, eyes fixed on the tablecloth like it held answers. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence between us was heavy, the kind that carries years of things unsaid. Finally, my mom started. "Your sister told us what happened. About the wedding." I gave a dry laugh. "Did she? Which version?" My dad sighed. "She said she didn't mean for you to feel left out. That she regrets how it looked." "How it looked," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "That's what she regrets, not what she did." "Emma," Mom said gently. "She made mistakes, yes, but—" I cut her off. "No. She didn't make mistakes, Mom. She made choices. Every single time. In college, when she lied about me to my friends. At home, when she made me feel like the problem child. And at her wedding, when she made sure I'd be humiliated in front of everyone I knew." My father's voice was low but firm. "She's still your sister." I met his eyes. "And I'm still your daughter." But somehow, That's never meant as much, has it? He flinched slightly, but I kept going. I used to think I just wasn't good enough. I said, my throat tightening, that if I was quieter, nicer, more successful, you'd finally see me. But you never did. You saw her, the one who shined. And I was just the one standing in the corner, trying not to disappear. Tears burned my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Do you have any idea what that does to someone? To grow up believing your love has to be earned. My mom's voice broke. Emma, we never meant. I know, I whispered. You didn't mean to, but you did. The silence that followed was different this time. Not heavy, just final. For years, I'd been waiting for them to apologize, to acknowledge the hurt, to make things right. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need their words to heal me. I already had. I stood up, taking a deep breath. I'm not here for an apology. I just wanted to say goodbye to the version of me who kept trying to make you proud. My mom started to cry softly. My dad looked down again. And I walked out, not angry, not broken, just done. Outside, the cold air hit my face like a cleanse. I looked up at the night sky, the same one that had watched over me all these years, and for the first time, it didn't feel distant. It felt like mine. Ethan called that night. How'd it go? He asked gently. I smiled faintly. It went exactly the way it needed to. There was a pause, then he said, You sound lighter. I am. Then it's time, he said, his voice warm with quiet excitement. Pack your bag. I've got a surprise. Ethan. No arguments. Just trust me. I laughed, shaking my head but smiling anyway. You and your surprises. The next morning, we drove out of the city. 2 hours later, we pulled up to a wide, snow-covered clearing surrounded by pine trees. The sunlight streamed through the branches, making everything look like a scene out of a dream. What is this? I asked, stepping out into the crisp air. Ethan grinned, opening the trunk and pulling out a wooden easel. This, he said, setting it up, is your spot. He motioned toward a small, unfinished cabin nearby, tucked neatly between the trees, half-built but solid. A friend's letting me use the property for a photo project. I thought maybe you'd want to write here for a while. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that's yours. I blinked back tears. You did this for me? He shrugged, smiling. You deserve a place where you're not someone's afterthought. Something in me cracked open right then, not in pain but in wonder. I walked up to the cabin, ran my hand along the smooth wood, and let out a shaky laugh. It's perfect, I whispered. We spent the rest of the day there, building a fire inside, hanging fairy lights from the beams, talking about everything and nothing again. As the sun dipped below the trees, painting the snow in gold, I realized I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's story anymore. I was writing my own. Later, when the fire burned low, Ethan sat beside me on the small porch steps. You know, he said softly, the first time I saw you sitting alone at that wedding table, I thought, that woman doesn't belong there. I smiled faintly. And yet, you came and sat beside me. He laughed. Guess I just wanted to make sure you knew it. We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels safe, not empty. Then I turned to him and said, Thank you, Ethan, for seeing me when nobody else did. He reached over, took my hand, and said, You were never invisible, Emma. You just needed the right light. I didn't reply. I just leaned my head against his shoulder, letting the quiet fill the spaces words couldn't reach. As the night stretched around us, the world felt wide and open again, full of beginnings I hadn't even dared to dream about. For so long, I thought that being left out meant being unworthy. That love had to be earned, that belonging was conditional. But I was wrong. Sometimes, you find strength not in being invited to someone else's table, but in learning to build your own. And sometimes, a stranger sitting beside you isn't just an act of kindness. It's the universe reminding you that you still deserve to be seen. That night, as the fire crackled and the snow fell softly outside, I finally let myself believe it. I wasn't alone anymore. Not because someone saved me, but because I'd finally chosen myself. And in that choice, in that quiet, fierce act of self-love, I found everything I'd been missing.